Hey, welcome to the Sequential Artists Workshop Pro Calls. Every week we ask another creator, another graphic novelist to come sit down with us and tell us where they came from, what were the first things they made, what did they make recently, how did they do it, what are they thinking about now, how are they going to move forward, how do they keep going, all those things, career things, art things, feeling things, creative things. Every month it's a new creator, new challenges, new stories. Come check it out, come sit down with us. You can sit down live for some of these calls by being a member of our groups. You can find us at learn.sawcomics.org. Come check it out, come be a graphic novelist with us. Come join us on the socials. Sometimes it's Comics Workshop, sometimes it's Saw Comics. Either way, come check us out and welcome. Austin, I'm just going to spotlight you. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Well, okay. Welcome everybody who's here. If you're here from Saw, welcome. If you're here and you're new, welcome. And you're at the Sequential Artists Workshop. I'm really excited. Austin, we've never really spoken, right? We've
I don't think so.
Twittered and keyboarded and.
I mean, you're one of those people who I've read for a million years, and I feel like, I know you and your wife, and I know, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like from a distance, but you feel like you know the person.
Right,
probably,
I know.
So this is a pleasure.
I know, me too. So I've told you, and I'll tell everybody that this is really, it's very informal. There's so much to talk about. I'm going to give a quick overview of I don't know. I mean, it's basically who you are, but you know that.
Well, it's my fault too that it's informal. Like, everyone should know that I told Tom, like, I'm happy to do this, but I don't want to prepare anything. I just want to talk with you and everyone here. So
awesome.
That was by my design. So it's not Tom's fault if this falls apart. It's absolutely mine.
Okay. I'll take that. I'm gonna all right. So anyway, the structure will be like, I'm gonna sort of just introduce some topics for about 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna pass it on to Sein, who's also co-host and is hopefully up in your corner. And Sein is our expert interviewer and sort of also student liaison, and is going to be. She's just a better interviewer than I am. Otherwise, I'll just like ramble like I am right now. I'm gonna share my screen again. I'm gonna show. I'm going to share my whole screen. Let's just let it all hang out. I assume you can see my whole screen. So I wanted to say that a great way to like a great sort of list of interview topics are like the 30 chapters in your 3 books. And I'm not going to list every one, but if you don't know the 3 books, y'all, it's Steal Like an Artist, Show Your Work, and Keep Going. And this is just a great set of topics to talk about. And I feel like obviously we could talk about all 30 of them. Maybe we could just talk about 2 or 3. These are things we talk about at Saw all the time. You don't have to be a genius. Something small, so important. I don't talk about learning to take a punch, but certainly good advice. Making gifts, being allowed to change your mind, definitely. Demons hating fresh air, we talk about that as well. I also really like this part of Keep Going, where it says leave money on the table, forget to take things to the next level. That's maybe my favorite. Let the low-hanging fruit fall off and rot. I love that too. If everybody doesn't know Austin's journey writing these 3 wonderful books, there's also a great place where he took his own Tumblr tags and wrote a bio. Real quick, he says,
I forgot I did this.
Did you? Well,
yeah, that's pretty good.
My name is Austin Kleon, and I am a writer and a cartoonist and web designer. I make these things called newspaper blackout poems, which some call poetry. I grew up in
scroll up a little bit. What year is this?
2009.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. All right.
I grew up in a small town in
only 14 years ago.
Oh my God. I was like, that's only 4 years ago.
No, it's 14 years ago.
Oh my God.
unfortunately.
All right. Well, you guys can all read this. I'll actually put this in the chat, and you don't have to
I
read the whole
should
thing.
redo, you've given me a great exercise, Tom. Like, I'm going to redo that post now.
Terrific.
Like, I'll redo that. I'm going to make a note and then repost it, because everyone should like check in with who they were,
terrific.
and who they think they are now, I think.
And and
Storytelling tech.
that's and that's something you're doing also. Like, you've just started going back to your own blog on that date and reposting those things too, and sharing those. And so that's another way in which, you know what, I'll just stop sharing
That's interesting too,
the
because I
screen.
haven't looked at that today. So
Oh, I haven't either. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. How do I do that? So I just want to say that, like, we've got a great community of people here, and we're always in conversation about creativity, and it's a real honor to have you, because you're one of our like guides in the world of creativity. It's like, how the question is like, how can I make things and not feel bad about it? And like, Austin's one of the guys who pretty much, like, that's your field work. Like, that's your job is to keep telling us how to keep making things and not feel bad. I think it boils down to that simple question.
And I would say that, one of my jobs is to remain unsure about how that is done, and to kind of mind my own practice for these lessons. Because I was very upset with you guys that used the word guru in the
Who did?
in the advertisement for,
maybe our
this.
social media person did that. It wasn't
Because,
me, I'm sure.
well, and I thought it would be a good thing to bring up, because I think if I have any strengths as a writer, or for what I do, I think it's because I really try to come at this work as a fellow traveler, or like a fellow student. I really don't see myself as an expert in anything. And I try to remain true to that. Tom, I think you and I are both influenced by punk rock a lot. And I feel very much that if I can be bad in front of everyone, in a sense, and share my own, struggles, then that is a form of teaching. I'm very I'm very obsessed with the story that C.S. Lewis tells, that's about how fellow school kids can teach each other more than the teacher can teach them, because they're at the same level. They're dealing with the same kinds of problems. And sometimes the teacher is here, or I don't like to do it here because this feels too hierarchical, but sometimes the student is over here and the teacher is over here, and it's hard to close that gap, but the other student is over here still. They're just a little bit further ahead.
Right.
Trying to look at myself in a mirror image, and it's not working for me, but you get what I'm saying. It's like when you're two students are like this with each other, and sometimes the teacher and the student are like this. And so it can be the fellow students can teach themselves more, more sometimes. And they're clued into what's relevant. So like, one of the tensions in my own work is I'm someone who writes a lot about being creative, but how much am I being creative in my everyday life? Like, how much am I, like, I write a lot about making art. Am I making art? Because I remember when I first sort of stumbled into my role of having a popular creativity self-help book out, which I never thought in those terms when I was writing Steal Like an Artist. But when I fell into that role, it immediately occurred to me, oh no, like, what happens if I just become one of these people that's on stage talking about doing creative work, and everyone's looking around like, well, what does he actually do other than talk about making creative work? And so, like, this is a real interesting tension. And it's just something that never gets resolved, but that I'm a huge I'm a tension junkie now. I love thinking about tension because I think that's where the energy is. I think wherever there's like a creative, whenever there's a tension, there's the possibility for creative things to happen. because when two things pull on each other, they create this kind of energy field. And so
Yeah.
you feel yourself kind of, pulled in between two things, and that creates like a, that creates a kind of energy. But I'll stop there. But the thing I always want to tell people is like, I'm figuring this stuff out too, as I go. And so I'm not going to have all the answers to your questions, So,
all right, no more questions, everybody.
Yeah.
No,
no more questions. This is over. No,
it's over. Yeah, go back to work.
I think one thing I love about Q&As, and I think this is the potential that we have here for the next hour and a half or whatever we have, is I do my best thinking when I'm when Socratic. That's like when I really think is in conversation.
Okay.
And so I always see these opportunities as for all of us to kind of create something.
Awesome. So that's
so I'm excited.
Well, you got me thinking about three different things. Two are real casual, so I'll point them out. One is, I'm sure you know Charles and Ray Eames.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, I think, was fond of saying, "Sell your ignorance." He had all these high-profile clients, but he would sell his ignorance. He would say, like, "I don't know how to do this. I'm gonna make it happen for you by figuring out how it works." And he was one of the first people to put. They together were one of the first teams to put on like a 50 or 100 screen presentation for IBM, like in the 50s or something. And we're like, I have no idea how to do this, but you're along for the ride as I learn how to do it. And that's what I hired him for,
Right. And to have the guts to be transparent about your process and to show what you're doing for the client. That's something that, a lot of people with client work, they're really afraid to do. Right. But it takes guts, but it ends up paying off, I think.
Yeah, and so many clients. I'm speaking from my days, and again now, Sign. I'm really sort of digressing. So, Sign is going to keep us on track. In my days and working in sort of corporate art and things like that, all of our clients were sort of anxious people that wanted to be more creative than they were. So if you actually let them into the process, they loved that.
I've always said, think of a pitch as a choose your own adventure story with the end lopped off.
Yeah.
When you're pitching someone, you're saying, we've been here.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the middle of this. Now, where do we go? That's up to you. It's your choice now, right? And I was only in advertising for like a year or two, but it taught me a lot when I was there. I mean, one thing it taught me is I never want to work in advertising again. but really, I mean, amazing being a copywriter in advertising, just learning to sell things with words, to be very direct, to tell people what you want them to do. Honestly, I could probably teach you the most important thing in marketing for artists is the call to action.
Mm-hmm.
Artists never want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
They never want to just say, here's what I want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So they never want to put a big button underneath that says buy now. But like that's the thing. Like that's what you need. You need your artwork, but then you need the big buy now button under it. And it pains you, but like that's what you need. Right? Subscribe to my newsletter. It feels awful, but you have to tell people what you want them to do. And so if you read my newsletter, for example, I'm always, it's friendly, but I'm always telling people what I'd love for them to do.
Right.
And that's even when it's like,
even when it's like, get the discounted version of the book right now because it's on sale.
Right. But that's against the artist. The artist doesn't really want to tell anyone what to do. They want to pose questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another tension that I'm really interested in. I mean, there really is a tension between art and commerce. I believe that deeply. There's a tension between, that's, Lewis Hyde's The Gift is my sort of one of my formative books. And his idea that art exists in a kind of Venn diagram between the market economy and the gift economy, that without the gift, there is no art. And so that tension between those things, something being a gift and something that you sell, I think that's like really real, and artists have to deal with that all the time. The comic, I think, is the best exploration of that, is James Sturm's Market Day.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's a beautiful, beautiful book about what it's like to sell your wares and to be an artisan. I think Market Day is just, have you read that, Tom? Do you know that one? It's probably been a while if you have. It's kind of older.
No, it's older. And you know what? I'll tell I'll tell you quite frankly, I didn't finish it partially because when I read it, I thought he was sort of under the spell of Seth too much. And I was like, I don't want to read another comic right now.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll read it.
You know what? Let's both read it because I haven't read it in a long time. I'm just trying to my relationship to comics is so casual now that it's I don't know how to explain it. I mean, comics and cartooning is so formative to what I do, but it's not. It's casual now, and I don't know how to explain it. Like, I would say that studying comics and cartooning is really a bedrock to my own practice, but I don't know that it's on the surface that much. I don't think people probably notice it that much. You know what I mean? I certainly wouldn't consider myself a cartoonist anymore.
Anymore?
I don't know. I mean, like, to me, comics, what's so powerful about them is they're really just a kind of language, you know. Just learning that visual language was so, I mean, I really think about my books as fancy zines, you know. I mean, that's what they are to me. The learning how the cartoonist gets to work on their book in a way that I want to work on my books, which is very difficult doing. It's very, very, I've been extremely lucky so far to be able to have the kind of hands-on this of that I have in mainstream publishing. I mean, most people don't get to illustrate their own covers and fight with the designer about layout. And I mean, on Steal Like an Artist, the last 10th anniversary edition, I actually did the whole, I started with a 16-page signature and I did the whole afterword, you know, because they gave me people who are listening, books are made of signatures. They're made up of groups of paper folded and bound, and they're usually in multiples of 16 or 32. And so when you're talking about making a book thicker in the industry, you would add another you'd think about it in terms of signatures. So for the 10th anniversary of Steal Like an Artist, they gave me an extra 16 pages. That's how my mind works, baby. You know, because if I know I've got 16 more pages, it's like, all of a sudden it becomes this fun, oh, I'm just making a zine here, you know? And so they give me like one zine to add to the end of this book. So I actually learned InDesign and I did the afterword. And I won't work another way now. It's ruined me. It's like I'm actually I refuse to. I'm never going to write another book in Microsoft Word and then illustrate. Like, I won't do it again.
Oh, I didn't know.
All of my books from now on will be done in that page by page way, because that's how I want to make books. And it was intoxicating. So now what I'm trying to do creatively now is I'm trying to come up with a system in which I can make pages. One of the things I love about my books is they're 6x6, and I know that trim size. And what I'd really like to do is like 3 more books that are 6x6. But what I'd like to do is kind of write them all at the same time. And then based on how they kind of appear, I'd fly them into different books. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I would like to work in pages and spreads, and I would like to literally make things that all look like they're in an Austin Kleon book, but then at the end kind of fly them around and push them into other books, and to find the books that these things are, because I have so much material. I'm almost like a musician that's recorded like 100 songs now, but you got to figure, but they're demos, you know what I mean? Like, I have 100 demos and I'm like, how do I shape these into tracks and like fly them into albums? You know,
I actually have a question based on that.
Great.
This will be our official transfer from my chit chat to Sign, and I'll take over the topic, Sign. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So
Sure.
actually, I have a ton of questions, and people have been feeding me questions as well. But one of the things that characterizes you in my head is that you are a wealth of ideas. Like, I subscribe to your newsletter, and each newsletter, there's just like ideas and resources. How do you come up with that? Are you reading constantly? How do you find all of these things that you share with us?
It's everything I've got. So one thing that people should know is that, this is everything I have. I'm not saving anything, I mean, like, when I put out the weekly newsletter, I mean, it's really, I have this, I decided a while back, I think it's Annie Dillard. It's one of the Annies, Anne Lamott, Annie Dillard. I think it's Annie Dillard, who, she has this, I think it's in The Writing Life, and she talks about spending it all. Just spending it all, because it just clears the decks for more to come in. And I just decided to start working that way a while. What happened to me is that's how I've always worked, is like every time I come across something interesting or something I really want to share, I blog about it. Like, I was a blogger I started a blog in like 2005, and that's how I process the world. If something interesting came around, I'd blog about it or make a drawing or whatever. And then what happened is, when Steal Like an Artist came out, all of a sudden it was like, well, now I have to behave like a real author. And this happens all the time in creative work, right? You see this all the time. The band, they've worked in this certain way and they get this record, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we got to hire like a real professional to go into the studio and like really work. And it's such a mistake because you've been working this way and it's gotten you to this point. And the minute you get to that point, you think, well, I have to act like a different person. I'm a real writer now, And so I went through years and years where I only blogged when I had like a longer, like a longer something deeper. And the blog just got worse and worse. And right before I started Keep Going, because there's a big gap between Show Your Work and Keep Going. There's like a 5-year gap. Right before I like kind of came up with the ideas for Keep Going, I said, screw it. I'm going to blog every day, like the old days. I'm just going to let it rip. I'm going to just blog every day. And it was incredible. I mean, things just started flowing out of me. And that book came together in a beautiful way. And I just said, I just want to keep doing it this way. I just want to keep like just throwing stuff. And the thing to understand about the newsletter, I know it seems like it's very like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff here, but I'm so daily with my work, and I have systems for storing things that when it comes time on Thursday to put the newsletter together, I've got this whole bunch of stuff that I can, I go to the blog. Okay, anything on the blog goes in the newsletter, because if it was good enough to blog, it's good enough to put in the newsletter. Anything, and then I'm going through Twitter. I'm like, okay, what did I tweet this week? Blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, okay, let me check my Apple Notes. And it's like, what's in there? And then I'm looking through my diary and I'm like, well, what did I watch or read that I didn't mention? So I have these systems. I have a system of collection, reflection, and then distribution or whatever it is. I don't know. I just made that up off the top of my head. But it's the same way that Thoreau worked. That sounds really lofty, but one of my heroes is Henry David Thoreau, and I can't stand it when people hate on him because he's meant so much to me personally. He's a guy who, and I think Emerson to a certain extent worked this way. Thoreau would take these big walks. He'd scribble in a notebook as he was walking around. He'd come back to the house, and then he'd write in his diary. And he did that every day. And so then when it was time to give a lecture, he had all this material. He'd just go back to his material and like cobble this into a lecture. And then when it was time to write a book, right? So it's this iterative, it's just like little bits and pieces, small things over time turn into something big, right?
And then this reminds me of your advice in Show Your Work. Share something you already And one of the questions around that is like, what inspired that? I mean, it sounds like it has kind of process. I mean, about the benefit this brings to the artist. What benefit do you think this brings to the audience?
Well, for the artist, I think it's a real easy way to be around without really letting anyone be around. I think I was talking to Oliver Jeffers one time, and Oliver Jeffers is a picture book. He's probably one of the most successful contemporary picture book illustrators. Fabulous guy. He's from Belfast in Ireland. Belfast. Jesus. Okay, sorry. It's from Northern Ireland. One time I was talking to Oliver, and he says, we were talking about these things. He says, "Oh yeah, I just go on there and I put one thing from the studio every day on Instagram. That's it. That's all I do." And that was like, I think that was after Show Your Work, but that was like that was someone. And then I'm just trying to think of where that dailiness came from. For me, the day is a unit of time that you can naturally sort of wrap your head around. The day is like the sun comes up and the sun goes down. And that's very easy as a human to kind of track into. Weeks are very difficult. Weeks are like almost, they're like a quarter of a moon phase, maybe. Like months are really hard to deal with, because unless you're like out in the field tracking the moon, like that's very difficult. Years, okay, a little bit more. That's a natural thing. That's, all of our units of time have like somewhat natural, like
it's a very human
analogs. But
human
the day is very easy to wrap your head around. It's very easy to just tell yourself, I'm just going to do one thing a day, or I'm going to like do one little chunk of effort a day. And then, so I think that's where it came from. But then I found out there's the other person who works that way, a contemporary, that is David Sedaris. David Sedaris does the same thing. He's writing in his little notebook all day. And then the thing I got from Sedaris is you write all day in your notebook, and then you write about the previous day the next morning. That's what I stole from him. And then Sedaris is even more instructive because he's actively going out on the road and kind of workshopping his material in front of an audience. I mean, he'll literally take an essay that's taken from his diary and worked up, and then he's got the piece in front of him, and when the audience laughs, he makes a mark, and when they don't laugh, he like draws a skull or whatever.
That's brilliant. He's kind of road testing his work. I want to make sure we get some other questions from the audience in here. And so Elizabeth is asking, you've done so many projects, like do you have a favorite project? Which is your favorite?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the things I really enjoy is just having these kind of never-ending projects that just like today I was thinking, I haven't made a blackout poem in a really long time. That would be kind of fun. I like having these things that I can kind of like dive into when I don't know what else to do. Probably my favorite are my collages. I think my collages are the most kind of visually interesting work I've ever done. They are me kind of teaching myself color. They use this really interesting technique that people think is really complicated, but it's not. But I also keep it a little bit, it's probably one of my favorite. The collages are really close to me because I kind of have this technique that's mine, and not a lot of people have figured out how to do it. And
is that the secret tape section thing?
Yeah, and
like,
it's just
I like that you keep it secret, and you're like, I'm not telling you, because you also want people to figure it out, right?
Well, anybody who takes the clues figures it out. It's tape and magazines. And you're like, it's tape and magazines. And like, what? I'm like, that's it. It's tape and magazines. Figure it out. And people figure it out, and then they put it on the hashtag, and I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, you have to, I think part of it is, again, it's that tension between wanting to share and wanting to keep secret. I think that it's really important for creative people to keep a little bit of secrecy, like, because it makes it interesting for you, But this is a long-winded way of saying what I think is what's my favorite work, and what's the work that everyone likes. is not the same thing. And that's something really, really important for artists to figure out that's something I figured out very early on in my career, is that the thing that I felt really close to, that I'm working on really hard, crickets chirp when I put that stuff out. But the stuff that comes really naturally to me, that I spend almost no time comparatively on, that stuff gets 2,000 likes. And the question becomes, okay, how do we balance this thing? You know, like, let's do like, how do you work with that? Well, the question
is that depressing? Is that depressing?
Sure. I mean, if you look at it on a certain way, I mean, it's like how you look at it, right? But I'm obsessed with time. I'm obsessed with time as the real artist medium, because, okay, like this morning I went to say to someone, the thing I really like about getting older. And instead of saying that, the thing I like about not dying is, because I was thinking about it, I was like, this is what I like about not dying, is that you get this time for things to like kind of work out. And I think every artist that I've ever studied they're grappling with this tension of like long term and short term, right? Like in the short term, I know I can make this work that like gets 2,000 likes on Instagram. But where am I in a year? Do those things add up to anything? Like, where am I in a decade? Where am I in 20 years, right? So it's that balance between like short term and long term. And I personally think with the collages, it's like, they're never the most popular thing, but they're getting me places that I haven't been. And that's what you want. You want to go places you haven't been. And and it's just hard, but you really have to decide. I just got done talking to some YouTubers the other day, and they were like, well, if you can just rip off other people's work and get rewarded for it, what's the point in all this? And I was like, exactly, boys. Now you've got it. What would you, if there was no return, if there was no, what would you do if no one cared? That is the question that every artist has to ask themselves. I really, truly believe that.
You mean, what is the work you would make if nobody cared?
That's right.
Yeah.
What would you do if no one ever was going to see it? I think it's a great question to ask yourself. I'm not saying that has to be your career. I'm not saying that's but you have to have that in the back of your head all the time.
Do you think that's where the juice of creation comes from? The things that you are so driven to create that you would do them regardless?
Yeah, I think the juice comes from, what do I think is missing from this place? Because if you think about it, being an artist is like there's a couple of ways to think about it. One of the ways is to point to things that you think people should look at, right? We know that, like, to put a spotlight on things that you think people should be paying attention to. The other way to think about it is like, what doesn't exist that I want? I think about this in terms of books all the time. It's like, what book do I want to read that doesn't exist that I could actually write? That's kind of how I go through my creative life now. It's like, what is not being done that I feel like I could do?
Yeah.
But I think it's a good question that I ask myself. If no one cared, I think honestly, for me personally, if I knew no one was ever going to interact with my work, I'd probably just make music all day, because that's what I really love. Like, I really love playing music and recording and being absorbed in sound. But I love it too much to make a living on it.
Yeah, it's hard to compromise on something you really love.
Yeah.
So I want to go to a question from Brenda. This harkens back to when you were talking about how peer-to-peer communication and learning can sometimes be better than peer-to-teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have thoughts about like how to bridge that gap between peer and teacher, like, student and teacher? How do you bridge that, and what can be done there?
Well, I think the teacher needs to make the leap of becoming a beginner at something. So I think it's always good to have the teacher doing something they're not completely expert at. I was talking to the comment section on my newsletter is just the most like lovely. They're the most lovely, beautiful people. And one of them is an art teacher. And she said, my work really got better when I just started bringing in my own work to the students and just showing them what I was doing and all the struggles I was having. And they were like so engaged. You know, the idea that an adult would get in the room and say, I'm working on this thing, I don't know how it's going, maybe you guys have some ideas. That is like, holy, you know, whoa, right? And then the other, so I think that on the teacher end, it takes a little bit of vulnerability to be an amateur or a beginner in front of your students, to let loose the fact that you really don't know what you're doing, because none of us do. But so that's one thing. But then the other thing I think is to get the students teaching as quick as you can, you know, to pull them up in front and give them kind of the reins in certain, you know, you gotta, again, it's another tension between chaos and order, right? Like just order in the classroom means nothing really interesting is happening. Total chaos means too much is happening and nothing, you know, so it's like that balance of chaos and order.
Right.
So I think about this a lot. I mean, I just look at my boys. I have two boys, they're 10 and 8. And, you know, they just learn so much more from each other than they do from us. You know, they really do.
That is wonderful. And I've gotten some insights. And I think Tom is +1 in your Tom is giving love to your comment about getting the students teaching. I have a question from Matthew about your comment section that you touched on briefly.
Yeah.
Is how do you handle feedback from readers and audiences? And do you like take their outside opinions on board, or do you kind of hold those at bay? I mean, there's a certain tension there between accepting other people's thoughts and holding your own.
I think I heard some business CEO say this one time, and I was like, yeah, actually. He said, feedback's great for telling you what you just did. It's terrible for telling you what you should do next. So I'm going to say that one more time. Feedback's great for telling you what you did right or wrong with the last project. It's terrible at telling you what you should do next. So I kind of I kind of take the people's temperatures, I guess. I like to see how people respond to stuff. And then sometimes that influences what I do next. But I have always, and it's kept me from, I mean, the way I've always flown is that it's got to be what I'm interested in. You know, like, because I really believe that whatever the artist or the writer is passionate about, they put the energy in there, and then that energy gets embodied, and then that gets unlocked from the reader or the viewer. So if I don't have real energy on the subject, if I'm not juiced and cooking on it, it's going to come out in the work. And that's why I don't try to do like, here's 10 tips to you know, here's a list of tax tips for artists, or I don't know, whatever it would be. That would actually be hella helpful to people. You know, I hate that stuff, so I'm not going to write about it. You know, I should hire someone and then they could write about it. But then I'm very against that too. Like, I'm extremely against having a team and being like Austin Kleon Limited. Oh, well, Sherry's over here today and she's going to write to you about whatever. It's like, that's why I didn't do that, you know, like,
So why are you against that? I mean, a lot of people take that route.
I think it's a fine route. And I think in some ways it's a much more, healthy way of doing this. I mean, trying to do whatever I'm doing with one person in a room is a lot. But the one thing I will say is that I forget who said it, but the thing about life is it's not learning to play the game. It's knowing what game you're playing, right? So it's not learning to play the game. It's knowing what game you're playing. And I am playing a very weird and particular game. And I know that about myself. And I know that's what keeps me interested in it. And that's why I do it. And what I'm not when I say that, when I don't have a team of people or whatever, I'm not denigrating people that do. I'm just saying, like, for me, this is a very particular game. I would love to have a bunch of people in here in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm a very social person. I'd love to get like a group of kids in here and like have a, you know, the factory type thing. But I think what I'm trying to do, that's just not in the cards right now.
Authentic. Yeah. And it's important to recognize, you know, like you said, what game are you particularly playing? So you had teased a little bit that you were thinking about 3 more books. And so Austin had the question that I think a lot of us are asking is there a 4th book in the works? But it looks like there might be a 4th, 5th, and 6th, maybe?
Yeah, I just can't figure out what they are. And of course you have to start with one. Everyone's kind of, I like to grow new books out of seeds from the previous books. Like, I don't know that a lot of people know this, but like, Show Your Work came directly out of Steal Like an Artist. Like, Show Your Work is literally grown from the seed of chapter 6 in Steal Like an Artist, which is make good work and share it with people.
Yeah.
Keep Going is literally just the last chapter of Show Your Work grown into a new book. It's like propagating plants in a sense. You know, you take a clip from one and like you grow another one. I hate writing books. So I don't hate writing books. I hate publishing. I really hate the publishing business. I really do. And I've had some beautiful, and I loved my editors on those books. He left. I loved working with Workman on the last 3 books. They've been bought by Hachette.
Yep.
And, you know, I've met some lovely people at Hachette, but the bottom line is there's not a company in the world that's ever gotten better by being acquired that I know. I mean, I can't think of one.
Wow.
And, you know, so, I mean, that's a bold claim, but, you know, I mean, these are real problems and so I'm very, I'm kind of a snot now too. It's like I've sold a lot of books and I feel like I've really earned the right to work on them the way I want to work on them. And so I'm fighting with my agent. I'm fighting with myself a lot of the time, you know. But I just don't think there's any use for success unless it gets you to a day-to-day existence that you want, you know? And so for me, it's like, I just really refuse to work the way I used to, which is like, oh, let me pull up Chat GPT and like spit out a book proposal that I can sell. And then maybe you know what I mean? It's just so, I hate book proposals with such a intense passion because it reminds me of being a copywriter when you used to have to write ad copy for a product that didn't exist yet. And it's antithetical, I think, to the real creative process. And so how I'm trying to write work now is I'm going to finish the damn books before I sell them. And I might not tell them it's finished. I know this is going to be up on YouTube, so people will know my game, but I really reject the publishing system in general. I just really find that to be, I think there are beautiful people working in publishing. I think it's it's a business like anything else. And I really despise it. I just really do. I love books. I love books so much.
So
and publishing has done such wonderful things for me, but I really hate it.
So if you love books, but you hate the current publishing system, I and several of the people in the chat are asking, would you ever consider self-publishing?
Well, I like money is the problem. You know, I like money and I like selling a lot of books. And so, you know, there's always a tension between, it's a lot of work to self-publish. That's the other thing. It's very easy for me to lay a book out and have the PDF say, okay, good, you guys go now, you know, and yeah, I mean, self-publishing is always a possibility. I think I haven't like burned. I figured self-publishing would be there for me when you know the kind of books I wanted to write were not selling anymore. But the other thing I want to say is that I do think of myself as a pop musician in the sense that I'm as artsy fartsy as any guy, but I'm trying to do something fairly commercial. And that's also part of the game, is to try to make a book that I love. I think it's a huge, coup in a sense that I was able to do these weird little books that they stick next to the cash register at like Michael's. I love it. I mean, that's what I get off on, because I think of them as really weird books.
Actually, so thinking about like self-publishing and getting your word out there without a publishers, you
Let me back you up for just a minute.
Sure.
Can I just back you up for a minute? I am a self-publisher, because everyone is. All publishing is self-publishing. Even if you're an author with a big publishing house, this is one of the great lessons that my agent teaches. It's you are self-publishing. And so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like, if you really think about what I do all day, that's self-publishing. So I am a self-publisher. What the books are is they're products that we make with a company and we put out into the world and people buy them.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of how I think about it.
That's an interesting distinction. And I'm wondering, you chose to put some stuff out on Substack, which is a monetized platform. And is that part of what you consider self-publishing? And why did you choose that?
Well, the Substack thing, I have to be honest, in some ways, the money was just too, it became clear. I have such a big audience with the newsletter that, if you think in marketing terms, you're going to convert. Here's the thing that's interesting about being a business person and an artist. Sometimes you make choices for business reasons that end up being really amazingly artistically lucrative. Creatively fecund, I guess. So one of the things that happened with the Substack is I thought, okay, we talked to a few social media companies and we had some people throw money at. By we, I'm talking about like me and my agent. It's not like the team. But like we had some people really offer us like pay the house off money for the newsletter to go on a certain platform. And I just thought that was my agent and I both agreed that's a terrible idea. To be in my position and take money from one of these tech companies is terrible. So I went with Substack because I think they make the best product. I don't think they're the best. A lot of writers kiss Substack's butt right now, and I won't do it because they're a tech company and I trust them as far as I can use them. And I'll tell that to Hamish or whoever space. They're a tech company. They make the best product right now and they hit a critical mass. They got a mass gathered. And so that's why I use them. What happened was I figured, this will just be like if people want to pay $50 a year, they get to hear from me once a week, something I've really cooked for them, like a special meal that I've served up for them every week. And I thought what would really be cool is if we could grow it into a community. Community is like the most overused word on the internet. But what's incredible to me is that the comment section on my Substack has really become a community. There are people that check in every week and they communicate with each other. And a lot of them are here on the chat right now, I think. And so, that's been my experience of it. I'm actually getting to a point where I'm not even sure I need to do anything other than be not a conduit, but a catalyst. Like I just start the conversation and like let people go. One of the coolest weeks we had was when I said, let's have an art show. What are you working on? And we did that in the comments and I think we had like 500 posts of just people sharing images. And it was just like the most incredible. I got really emotional, like seeing all these because it was so great. And I think we're going to do more things like that on the newsletter. And I'm really interested in growing it as a real community. I've noticed people like chattering with each other in the comments, and I love that.
That's great. Community can be so powerful. I know at SAW, I've really enjoyed the community there because it's so wholesome and nurturing. I want to turn the bus around and ask a question that's not so business faced.
Okay, great,
So
please.
Kara wants to go back to comics and ask, what did you learn from the Moomins and Tove Jansson, and why is that important to you?
Oh my God. Well, I love them. I love the Moomin Comics because they are the most beautiful. They're about a family of weirdos that really, it's the only real, like, I just love that I want to be part of that family. You know, when I read the Moomins, I'm just like, this is such a beautiful portrait of what a bunch of weirdo bohemian. I mean, because they are like they're like, I don't know. I wanted to be in that family. I read those comics when my kids were really little, and I was like, this is it. This is who I want to be. You know, Moomin Papa sitting at the table saying, you know, Moomin Mom, isn't this a nice, quiet life? Yes, but it sure would be wonderful if something terrible would happen. You know, like that kind of like, you know, like I just loved it. I mean, I fell in love with her, and I fell in love with those comics, and I've tried to read the novels, and I like the novels, but there's just something about those original Tove Jansson comics that they unlock something in me. And I just love the family. I've always wanted, I'm a child of divorce. My parents got divorced when I was 13. And so I was like punk rock, divorce, politics, reading. It was like punk rock, my parents getting divorced, and reading A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. That's like my whole teenage years, like Crucible, like it was just like gelled in that moment. But I've always been really I dated girls in high school whose families I liked. I mean, I'm really, when I met my wife, it was really like she has a big family. You know, I wanted to be a Tenenbaum. You know, I'm Eli Cash in the Royal Tenenbaums. Like I always wanted to be a Tenenbaum. I wanted to be part of a big like family. And so that's what the Moomins did for me. And now I have my own family, which is so cool. And they're all weirdos. It's great. You know, like we're all just unbelievable weirdos. And my kids are extreme. I mean, my wife's extremely creative. My kids are creative. I mean, it's like a dream come true around here. No, I'm not going to say it's like, you know, it's easy because no family is easy, but it is really, but the Moomins gave me this sense that if you make space for the people you love to be who they are, that is a really beautiful thing. You know, a household, the best household is where you can all be together, but you can be alone together. You could have your own deal, and you're also a unit. You know, I could go on about that for a long time.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect crucible if you're trying to be an artist, you know, people to connect with, but who also embrace your weirdness. So, yeah.
Yes. And I think Tove Jansson, to a certain extent, got a little bit of that when she was growing up, and I think she transmits that in the comics.
Cool. So I am a avid practitioner of your 30-day challenge.
Oh, cool.
Each month I come up with a new thing I want to focus on for that month. So I wonder, what was your inspiration for that, and do you use it in your own practice?
Yes. And it's really funny because I probably read about it on Lifehacker or some stupid, you know, website online. It was Jerry Seinfeld. He said, well, you get a calendar and you have the calendar on the wall, and every day you make an X in the box and you don't break the chain. You know, you get one X in a box and then you put an X next to it, and pretty soon you'll get addicted to filling those boxes.
Right.
That's what Seinfeld said. Of course, later he said, that's the stupidest. I cannot believe people are into this. Like, of course. And again, that's the expert problem, right? Jerry Seinfeld's big problem, and I'd say this is actually a problem with his work in general, is he's not a regular guy anymore. Right? I mean, like if you watch Comedians in Cars, I have a secret, and I'd say this to Jerry, I have a secret theory that the editor on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee secretly hates Jerry and like cuts it in ways that make him look really bad. But Seinfeld's like one of those guys. I mean, he's he's this really, really rich guy, and he's best when he's still like, do you ever notice? And he's just like talking about weird stuff. But like he's not great at thinking about what it must be like to be someone just starting out, for someone just starting out like a kid and hearing, oh, you mean if I just make a song every day and then I make an X in the box and I do that for 30 days, that's like, that'll get me someplace? It's like, yeah, it will.
So is it something you use in your own practice, or is it something you feel that you've moved away from? Okay.
I do it when I have something that I have to have produced. But the thing I would say is I've been doing it every day of my life for the past like 10 years. So like, I mean, I already work every day. I mean, I sit down and write my diary every day. I take a walk every day. I'm doing these things already every day in a sense that I don't need to do it on the calendar anymore. But if you think in a certain way, I also keep a daily logbook. And so having to write down what you did every day, that's like putting an X in the box. So in a sense, do you get what I'm saying? Like in a sense, I am doing the activity. It's just in my actual logbook.
Yeah, you've internalized it to the point where it's innate. And you make me think of something. Flaubert used to say, be regular and orderly in your daily life so you can be creative and wild in your art.
Violent also.
Violent, yes. Thank you for correcting it.
And the great thing about that, I've always loved that quote. And the other thing is that if you have a routine, it's not just about adhering to the routine no matter what. It's the fact that you've built this routine. And what happens is if that routine gets broken, the result is the interruption is like even greater in a sense. And so I think there's a real possibility for things to go even more wrong when you have a routine. You know what I mean? Like one of the reasons, because I have a routine, that means when something goes sideways during the day and I have to break the routine, in some ways I can enjoy it more because I know I have that routine to come back to tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Like you'd think that a routine would like harden you. It's like, I gotta do my routine because if I don't, like I didn't, whatever. But it's like, actually, I'm like, no, I know tomorrow I'm going to go back. And I know what I'm supposed to do tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I can kind of deviate from the routine now and really enjoy it in a way I wasn't able to in the old days because my routine's so in place. I don't know if that makes sense. Again, this is another like paradoxical like tension thing.
No, I have a working routine that I enjoy as well. I hadn't thought about it in exactly that terms of like, if you broke it, you have this like routine to go back to, but I think that's really interesting. I find it like, really sets me up for the creative moment to have a routine in place. So,
I like stupid rituals too. Like, I always ask people, what's the dumbest thing you do in the studio? And then of course I have to answer. So like my stupidest thing in the studio is like, I have a cigarette pencil that I smoke in the studio like this. Like I literally, I act like I'm smoking in the studio. And like, there's something about it, man. Like I'll be at the desk like an old newspaper guy and like the 30, hey, and I love it. And that's something I do. I love stupid rituals too. Like, so there's routine and then there's rituals. The ritual is like the thing that gets you into the work.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Lydia wants to ask if you could talk about your daily logbook.
Yeah, I have a bunch over there. That's something I started in 2009, and the logbook is Linda Berry's my hero. I'm sure she's the hero of many people here. But Linda said the saying one time where she was like, the obituary recounting of like a diary. She was talking about how boring a diary usually is like, I did this, I went here, I did that, whatever. And I actually think that's only boring if it's in prose form. I think if it's in a list, like an appointment book, it becomes fascinating over time. So, and again, everything that seems boring in the moment later on is the most fascinating thing that you do. So if I write down like the power went out and I don't know, it's like these mundane details that bring back all of these memories. So the logbooks are literally appointment books in reverse. So I literally just start the day. I'm like, I even have icons. When I do the same thing every day, I have icons. So like if I have a cup of coffee, I draw a little cup of coffee. And then if I write my diary, I draw a little tiny diary with a pen next to it. And kids drop off as like a car with 2 arrows coming out of it. So like I have this shorthand for things that are repetitive. And then I write that, like, went out to the studio, wrote the newsletter, drank a smoothie for lunch. Like that's the kind of boring stuff I write down in there. And I literally, anything that happens, any way I spend time in chunks, you know, I write that down. I write down what I read, what I watched on TV. I try to just like the most mundane details. And then over time, those books become indexes of my life, because I can literally go to any day and be like, okay, what did I do on that day or whatever. It's a way of and mostly I just do that because I have a terrible memory. I'm not even sure how creative they really are. For me, it's because I have a terrible memory, but it's also cognitive. It's offloading. It's a way for me to get things out of my head and onto paper so I can move on. So it's a kind of offloading of my life onto there. But they've become extremely, they can be very depressing going back to them, because one of the things I've discovered about myself is I'm a very seasonal person. I hit the same problems every year. I go through the same things over and over again. And again, there's different ways you can look at that. You can say, oh, how depressing that I go through the same thing all the time. Or you can say, I've been here before. Like, you know, and so it's really just a mindset thing. But those are the logbooks, and they're really just indexes of my life. And then I have a bona fide diary that I write in every morning. And sometimes I do comics in those. I do them with a brush like Linda Berry tells you to, only it's a modified version of it. I have some of those up on my website that you can see. I don't know if I have one nearby. I could grab one. This shelf right here, these are all my diaries. So this is like, up here is like 2017, and these are all from, those are the Trump year diaries.
Even starting diaries is a lot. Do you ever think about what will happen after you're gone? Because my mom died and I didn't get to read her diaries. They were disposed of. So is that something
my mom, she's like, burn that wicker cabinet. Just burn it. And I'm like, you think I'm going to burn that cabinet? No. She'd probably watch this later. She likes to watch stuff on my website. I don't care what I mean, I don't know. I don't really care what happens afterwards. I do think it's possible that if anyone cares about me, then when I die, they will look at the diaries and say, you know, these are more interesting than the books.
Oh, interesting.
Because they are really they're very multi-mode. They're very like they're I mean, I do my collages in them. So like the collages are in, because okay, here's one way that I'm very inspired by comics. I'm very Art Spiegelman in the sense that there's no original. Like all of my work is meant to be reproduced. And so my collages, for example, over time, they'll probably deteriorate because they're made of like, you know, it's not acid-free tape as far as I know. It's like just crummy tape. They'll deteriorate over time. And the digital copy of them or the print I make later will actually be the same thing that outlasts it. So that's in some ways how I'm influenced by comics. I was very influenced by, there was like a book called Masters of American Comics or something where they went to like a bunch of different studios, and it just happened to be Jonathan Safran Foer that interviewed Art Spiegelman. And that's where I stole the idea of the analog and the digital desk, because Art Spiegelman was talking about all these stations he had around his studio. And I was like, well, I don't have a studio in New York, but I can have 2 stations. Because I have 2 main ways of operating. It's like stuff I do by hand and then stuff I do on the computer. And that was the idea behind the analog and the digital desk. But I remember Art Spiegelman talking about how there is no real original. It's like he's doing things by hand and he's scanning it into the computer and he's printing it back out and he's working on it again. And like I just found that really inspiring. And so that's kind of how I go about it. Now you got Chris Ware, who like, he could sell one of his originals for whatever, but then it's never going to look like it does in the because he colors it all digitally. Right.
There used to be the line, a cartoonist draws with a printing press.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Which is no longer true because we read so much on screens now. But
right.
Then.
But I don't know what it is about the diaries. They're, you know, the other thing that I think for my own personal practice is there are obsessions and completist tendencies. I can't stop in some ways. I did write a newsletter a couple of weeks ago about, I had this moment when I finished a diary and I was like, what if I just didn't do another one? And then I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like one of the things that killed me is when James Kochalka stopped doing the American Elf. I thought that was one of the great tragedies in modern comics because he just quit. And I think it was good for him, but sucked for me. I think he does them now on his Patreon, but that terrified, man. That's a whole other subject. It's like, when do you quit?
Yeah.
When do you stop? You have to get James on to talk about that. That would be really interesting, actually.
You must have done almost 20 years of those. Certainly 15.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because his kids are like in college now, and I remember reading those before I had kids, and it just blows my mind. I think I started reading American Elf right after I got married, and I always loved American. I'd say American Elf was a big influence on me because that's another thing of someone who did something every day in a sketchbook, and it becomes a body of work over time. You know, James is an interesting fellow because a lot of my ideas, James is he's very into his own ego and stuff. He thinks ego is really powerful. And I mean, he's a really interesting guy. I think he does way too much. I think, I think he's kind of Prince-like in the sense that he's like, he makes too much stuff. You can't keep up with it. And he knows that. Like he'll talk about he'd be a fascinating guy to interview. Actually, it would be kind of fun to interview James for something. He's a weird dude. Great
I've seen him naked far too many times.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Okay, time for a new question. So one thing that often comes up for artists is creative blocks. Do you have, you've written this book, keep going. Do you have any advice you'd give to somebody who's feeling creatively blocked?
Yeah, I often think that block is problems of input. I usually think that, and I think some people are like, yeah, right. But a lot of times I feel like problems of output are problems of input. I feel like you're not significantly juiced enough. I think it's really important to have a routine and to show up and try to make things happen. But I also think it's really important to go walk away and read. When I don't know that I face block as much as just not knowing what to do next, which I guess is kind of the same thing as block. But I just read, I just go back, I listen to music, I reread myself a lot, which talk about ego. But one of the things that happens when I go back to these books is I realize how much stuff I have to talk about that I just forget about. And I like referring to myself a lot. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but most of these books are upright with the spines out, but some of them have their spines down. Mm-hmm. Those are years on this date. So one of the things I like to do is go into the studio, and it's April 11th, and I pick out April 11th from 2017 and read what's there. And then I go to 2018 and read what's there. And then I read 19 and so forth until I get an idea. And so that's something I do as just a weird, because often it's weird. They'll talk to each other. There'll be 2 Aprils where I was talking about the same thing. And this is totally, I learned this from reading Thoreau, because I read Thoreau in this I have this abridged diary of his, And I would read him that way. Whatever day it was, I would just read whatever entry there was in the book for that year. And I had these little tabs and I just flipped through the book. It was the most amazing reading experience. And I thought, well, I should do that with myself. And what you find is that the mind, I have a collage mind. Like I see two things and I see how they're connected. Like it's an associative mind. And I think all of our minds to a certain extent are like that, because it's like how our brains are formed. You know, it's like one, you know, that's literally how it's just connections. The brain is just nothing but connections. So if you read 5 diary entries, you find something that connects. You know, there'd be something in there and oh, okay, I'll go with that. You know, that's also why I like to get 5 books in a pile and just start flipping through them and being like, okay, read a little bit of this book, read this book, read a little bit of this book. How do these books speak to each other? And then all of a sudden you've got a piece. And there's some really good essayists who do that. Like Tim Kreider is one of my favorite writers. And I feel like Tim does that. Tom, you probably know more about, like, I feel like Tim is able to do that. He'll take like 2 things and form an essay out of it. Sedaris is really good at that. He can take 2 things from his life and kind of just make them like dovetail, like fit into each other. It's an interesting essayist trick. I wish I was an actually good writer. I do that more often, but yeah, I think when you collage, what I'm talking about is collage. When you're stuck, I think collage, that's another thing I learned from Linda. She said, when you're blocked and you don't know what to do, start gluing things to a piece of paper and see what happens. And I think for me, what I'm talking about, this technique, whether it's reading my own diaries or reading other books, I'm trying to collage my input. Like I'm thinking of input as collage. So
it's very interesting. You're actually talking about a temporal collage when you're going back and reading your diaries and putting different, that's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Layers of time. Yeah. Yourself. It's like collaborating with yourself.
Yeah.
I used to do these experiments with my kids where I never thought my kids were very good at working together. What I would do is I'd take something from one kid and I'd say, okay, now finish this. I give it to the other kid to finish. So I'd have them, and I even have old drawings from one kid that I would give to a kid in the present and say, and so they collaborated in time that way. And I always thought that was really interesting. I like I'm always inspired by musicians now. It's so easy with music now because everybody uses like digital tools that you can email whatever file you're working on just to the other musician, and then they can pull it open on their computer and like play on it. I'm really interested in this idea that we can collaborate. We don't have to be in the same space and time to collaborate.
That's very cool. I have 2 more audience questions, and then I will pass the baton back to Tom to take us out. So I hope I'm not messing this name up. Mara Glenn asks, what systems do you use to keep track of what you read in terms of ideas and authors? I guess when you're data collecting for your mental collages.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I usually have like a list in the back of my logbook for each year. That's not very helpful. Most of the time it's just like stuff. I just log stuff in the newsletter. It's like I go back through the newsletter and say, what did I read this year? I don't have a great system. Just lists, really. Lists and folders. I actually love this book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And it's like, it's what every nerd on the internet. There was a time when like everyone was into this book, but for a reason, it's actually a much more Zen book than I think it gets credit for. It's got David Allen is like wearing a suit on the front cover, and he looks real stiff and he looks really businesslike. But his advice in that book I find really amazing. And his advice is it's about lists and folders. So you make a lot of lists to stay organized, and then you put things in folders so you know where to get them. So it's about like offloading and storage and retrieval. And so like for me, it's just about knowing where to look for things. So yeah, I don't have a great system for keeping track of the books I read. I've also gone through this real tormenting experience lately. I used to make year-end lists of books, and I think I'm going to stop doing that because think I really have felt this pressure to share books that I think are, let me put it this way, the books that have the most impact on me as a person are not necessarily the books I'd recommend to anyone else. And that was a time where I found my personal and my public life really struggling. And so what I do now is I recommend books. Oh, so-and-so has a book out, and I put that in the newsletter. And then if I read something I think people really love, but I keep stuff back now, you know.
Yeah.
And what that also does is that means you can read some stuff that maybe you're not supposed to read these days, which I mean, I don't use certain words, but there is a kind of sensibility these days where it's like, if you're reading a certain book, like, I don't like that. I think reading should be a private experience in a lot of ways, and we've publicized it a lot because we broadcast what we read all the time. Again, this is a great tension because I'm all about like sharing what you're into, but I also think that there are things worth keeping to yourself. So it's tricky. But
so
I also like reading bad books. Sometimes bad books are like really helpful to me because I'm like, this is a piece of shit. Like, this is really, like, I can do better than this. Or it's like, this is a piece of shit, but like, this idea is really interesting. You know?
You can learn as much from how not to do things as how to do them. I have one last question. This is from Monica. And as a creative person, what do you do if you are somebody who makes like so much stuff, it clutters the studio? Do you have thoughts about like how to manage?
You're asking me? I love mess. I think one of the more interesting, so again, a book that I think is really fascinating, I'm not so sure that it's flawed in spots, but extremely fascinating, is Temple Grandin's Visual Thinking that she just put out. Temple Grandin, of course, is like one of the most famous autistic people ever. But she, of course, had a career she designed systems for people who don't know. Oliver Sacks wrote about her. She designed like chutes for cattle slaughterhouses, like how to keep cattle docile and calm while they're on the way to being slaughtered, that kind of thing. So like she was able to, because her autistic brain, she can think visually, she can get inside the mind of the cow moving through the chute. That's like that was her work. But anyway, this book is about, it's called Visual Thinking. It should be called Visual Thinkers because it's about people who think visually. And one of the things that she said is there are pilers and there's filers. So there are people who like to have lots of piles of stuff laying around in their office, kind of messy. And then there's people that need things filed away. Some of her research shows that visual people tend to be pilers. And I would say a lot of the people that are on this call probably consider themselves visual. And that just gives you a little bit of like permission to be messy, because really having things in piles means that you can, kind of, you can get at them.
Well, I find that personally validating. So thank you for that insight.
I did. So that's why I shared it, because I love my piles and I don't want to get rid of them. I mean, you should see the kitchen table. I mean, our kitchen table is grounds for divorce. I mean, it really is. I have just a mess, but my wife's very patient with me.
Cool. Well, I'm going to hand the baton back to Tom. Thank you for answering all our questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a little bit more time too, Tom, but I mean, 90 minutes is more than enough to listen to me. So,
well, I've got a couple questions. I've actually got three, and I just realized they're all interrelated. So maybe I could ask them all at once, and you can figure out the best way to answer it. And so thanks, Sign, for handling all the community questions. Yeah, we love the word community here. We certainly know it's overused. And thanks everybody for asking questions, and thanks Austin. So all right, so I'm trying really hard not to talk about my own music making, which I started 2 weeks ago for the first time in my life.
Good.
I'm going to send you an email. So watch out for an email from me that says,
please
download my music.
I have lots of ideas about, music is really I wish I wrote a little bit more about music. I think I'd be
Mm.
a pretty good music writer, because I really, although the thing I realized today when I was listening to a podcast is that I think about music as a musician, and there's a real difference in, there are writers that write really well about being listeners, and then there's writers that write really well from a musician standpoint.
Well,
and
we
then
need
some
both.
people do both, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like, and I'm not asking the question, I'm already digressing, but I feel like so many of us are dabblers in so many media that we want to hear inside stories on, like, you know, we want to hear what people are, what it takes to make music, and even if,
yeah,
you know,
and I think
or a movie.
cartoonists are inherently interdisciplinary already, because you're trying to merge writing and pictures, and that's
I was going to mention that it's kind of like,
you know,
a
I think
collage.
it's not only different parts of the brain, it's like different, like, it's like different cultures of the image versus the text is like a huge battle in Western civilization, you know.
We rarely talk about it that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, this is, so I speaking of a book that's kind of crazy, and I love this guy named Leonard Shlain, who wrote a lot of books about, he got really into brain. I'm very into hemisphere difference and brain. No neuroscience wants to talk about it, but the fundamental thing is that our brains are asymmetrical, that they aren't.
I thought that was being slowly debunked or something. No?
I mean, here's the thing, is like, it's not that there are left-brained and right-brained people. That's not real. Well, what is real is that the different, and again, neuroscientists love to poo-poo this, the different hemispheres pay different kinds of attention to the world. Now, Shlain and Ian McGilchrist, who's a big influence on Barry, Linda Barry, they talk about how culturally there have been shifts between this kind of very holistic, right-brained, paying a kind of attention to, like, kind of soft, holistic attention versus the left brain's laser-focused, manipulative attention. And that we're in a culture right now that's very into that right now. Now, people don't take my word, I'm just some idiot in a room. But for me, it's been hugely helpful. I mean, to throw out hemisphere difference just because it got bastardized in like the 80s and 90s, the like left brain, right brain people, I think it's a real mistake, because I do think I do think, from what I've read, there are real differences in the hemispheres, and whether you subscribe to it as a metaphor or an actual real thing, it kind of is the same. It has the same effect. I think that there are, what I'm trying to say is, without, I mean, it gets so woo-woo so quickly. There are different qualities of attention.
Yeah, sure.
And it's attention. There's attention in attention, in which you're being pulled as an artist. You really have to be able to, like, have this kind of holistic, you know, connective, very open mind, but also be laser focused too. And it's this very, there's like a tension there, but you also see it in the culture. And I find that really fascinating. Anyway.
No, it's actually a great segue to the question I had for you, the sort of final question, which again is 3 questions, but I realize they're all similar.
Okay.
So I'll ask all 3, and then you can answer in whatever way you feel free or feel best. And the question is a question of scale. So far, we've talked so much about the day-to-day and the routines and the small efforts, and even the small efforts turning into bigger projects. But I wanted to know 3 different things that, and one is like, again, let me ask all 3 questions. Do you ever dream of, like, someday I want to make a really big collage on a wall or something, or I want to find somebody to host me to make a big collage or whatever? The other is the world, our society, the world you and I exist in, and all 100 of us or however many, is in such a fix and such a mess. And I know we're all doing our little bit to make the world better. but do you ever feel like it's not enough? And do you ever feel like we have to somehow get bigger? That's the second question. The third one is about time. And time is changing, or everything is changing so much that how we look at how we deal with time is going to be changing soon. And I see what you're doing. You're sort of an archaeologist in a way that, like, maybe Maria Popova is as well. And you go back into the creative archives and you say, look at, this person did this and this person did that. But pretty soon we're going to be so flooded, and we're already so flooded with stimulus, so flooded with content, so flooded with stuff that, like, the people we're going to need the most are other archaeologists to go through even the recent records. Hey, look at this. Look what happened last year. Look at how this person managed that journey. So anyway, so that's 3 questions of scale I want to throw out at you, and ask if how you handle those, because that's the tension in my creative life. I think often is like, I love the day-to-day. I love the routine, but I just feel the maybe not the pressures, but I feel the realities of these large scale things, and I can't escape it.
I just really like tending my little plot. The older I get, the more I don't want to be defeatist, but
yeah,
I really believe that there's a ripple effect of, if you can kind of see, I think you can have it both ways now, is what's so interesting, is because you can kind of like tend your plot, but then you can broadcast, and broadcast is actually a farmer term. I didn't realize this, but when you toss seeds, that's broadcasting.
Wow.
You're casting with a broad. Yeah, I didn't know that. I find gardening, I'm not a gardener, but I'm married to one, and I find gardening to be the best metaphor for creative work, because it's connected to the natural world. It's a human activity. It's ancient. But one of the things I really love about plants is that you can grow a plant in your backyard, and then you can propagate. You can take clippings off of it and give it to people, and then they can take it to their yards and grow them in other places. And so I think that gardening can be this whole different metaphor for how you think about creative work. And gardening is something that you can't fight the forces. You can't, there's either sunlight or there's not. You cannot grow low light plants in sunlight. You cannot grow low light. You can't grow high light plants in low light places. There are low maintenance plants and there are high maintenance plants. There are one of my hobbies is taking pictures of signs at garden centers. So I love, like, the signs that say thrives on neglect, things like that. So yeah, I just really, I believe in tending to your plot. And I believe that I just think that most human change is made on a local level. I just think this dream of that we're all going to kind of get together and figure it out, I just don't. I'd love to believe it, but I just think we have to focus on the local. I just think we have to. I just think the concentric circles of getting your household together, getting your street together, getting your neighborhood together, getting your city together. I think they have to. I just think, like most human action, I think most people would be happier if they focused on the local. And of course, I mean, our world is so interconnected that it's really hard. I mean, you have local problems that have roots in, big global problems. But for the artists in particular, but the question of scale is a really interesting one. The thing that I love about the internet, it's funny because I think I come off as a guy who's very cranky about technology, but I obviously use it. One of the things I love about the internet is small things get big. Everything looks the same on a phone screen. My doodle from my studio has the same weight as the Last Supper looked on a phone screen. That's part of the problem. Is you can't really take in the Last Supper when you're looking at your phone. Like, it's kind of impossible. But I love that small things can get big on the computer. That scale can be manipulated. And then to a certain extent, one of the reasons I like working in miniature, which I do think of myself as almost like a miniaturist, is that when people experience my work in a book, it's about the same size. It always freaks me out when I see Peanuts panels that Charles Schultz drew. You know, they're like this, huge. They were so shrunk down, and it's so beautiful, and I love that. I almost love reduction more than blowing up. And I don't know what that says about me. Well, for one thing, when you reduce an image, you get it real crisp. Comes, but I'm just someone who's really started believing in the local, because I used to be somebody who didn't care about what was around me. It's very interested in the world at large, very whatever. But now I'm just like totally fascinated in the local as a possibility to really affect change. And I just think the human mind is not, I don't think we're supposed to know more than 100 people.
I agree.
You know, I don't think we're supposed to. That's another real thing, is like our evolution has just not caught up with our surroundings yet. You know, I mean, our surroundings outpaced our evolution. And that's a really frightening and terrifying thing. But I also, you know, you're supposed to be frightened. Frightened, it keeps you alive. You know, I mean, like in the wild, it's like being frightened means that all your senses are pumping and you're looking around, you're making sure. I mean, like it's been, I just become such a, I was such an indoorsman as a kid. The natural world, I just find endlessly, these days, I just find it endlessly instructive. Like, if you just look at owl pictures, like online, you're like, oh, look at that owl. Oh, it's so cute, fluffy, whatever. If you watch owls on your security cameras, like I do all day, they're the most paranoid, unbelievably skittish and squirrely, in a sense, creatures, because they have to constantly be like doing this, looking around, because otherwise they get eaten. My owls do. Like Flacco in New York, like he's fine, he's huge, not very few things, but my little screech owls in the backyard, they have to really like pay attention. So I'm very much just like, I think one of the books I would love to write is just the human artist, just about how I think art at its best really makes you feel human. It puts you in your senses. It gets your heart rate up in a sense. It makes you feel things. And I think everyone's trying to make art. I mean, that's part of making art, but that's also what good art experience should be. And I just think the best thing that art can do is to validate your existence as a human being, right? Is to affirm your existence as a human being. I don't know how to write about that, but that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons I'm kind of interested in doing a book about art and kids, because kids really are so awake to everything. And they haven't like ingested all the signs and symbols yet. And so everything's like kind of raw and psychedelic in a sense. Right. So I don't know, I've rambled too much, but I just think to me the local is universal. And so I really am interested in, I do believe things have a scale though, boy buddy. I mean, like I think I have a scale right now where I think this is about the audience I am comfortable with. You know, like, I mean, I think if I sold more books, I don't know what would happen. You know, like I'm not sure if more people, like right now we have this I think about 2,500 people are in our private, like kind of paid tier of our newsletter. That's such a good number, because we can still, but I don't know if it was 10,000, the quality would change, you know? And so I don't know. I think things do have a scale though. And I like that you asked about scale. I'm going to think about it more. Because I think that we're outsized in a lot of ways.
That's the reason for the question, is like it's so inescapable how big things are, and how and the questions that we're confronted with are so big, but we're not capable of handling those questions. And so how do we find that garden we want to tend to, or how do we tend to it? That's,
I know, I just, the more I think about, you know, Kraftwerk called their studio the electronic garden. They felt like they were growing things. And I
Uh-huh.
just like, that's how I, like around here. I mean, it helps. I wish I could show you because I've got Megan's plants. They're all around the deck around my studio, and our whole yard is like a garden center. But I really am like, what I got growing over here? You know, it's like put things on the wall, take little clippings, and then I think of the blog as a garden too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't know. It's a great question though. The question of scale, I think, is really important. Like what, and I think a young artist, like, you know, it'd be a good question to ask yourself: at what scale do you want to work?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And how do you want to live? Because I'll tell you, in my neighborhood in Austin right now, there are a lot of people mortgaging themselves to the hilt, you know, tearing down the old houses and building the new ones. And you watch that, you know, you could choose at what level you want to live on. Like if you want to live in a fancy city like Austin where everything's overpriced, and you know what I mean? It's like very, I've always, you know, like with young artists, I'm always like, move to Cleveland, do whatever you want.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
You know? So like that, you know, so it's the question of scale. It's a great question. I wish I had better answers, but for me, it's just kind of like I'll tell you what my game is, what my personal game is,
Right. Back to that.
Is to work in miniature and then blow that out to the, you know, send it out,
broadcast it
and let people take, you know, and propagate and all that. That's my game anyway.
There's no, it's great. There's been some great takeaways. Definitely working small and building things from that. But I love this idea of broadcasting. I love that you gave us that metaphor or the actual origin of that word, this farming term. That's terrific.
I think I got it right. Look it up later.
Someone will.
It definitely has rural and agricultural roots. I know that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As do I.
as do probably all of us, you know, thousands of years.
True. It is the forming of civilization. We wouldn't have it without it, for better or worse.
Yay, Austin. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on, and yeah, thank you so much. This has been a total pleasure.
Thank you. I hope it was helpful to people.
Let's see. Yeah, I think we're good. We're any other questions? You're just gonna have to ask me. And I'll give you my best Austin Kleon impression and next week and in our other sessions and stuff.
Well, you know, Tom, we could always do this again. I would love to do a back and forth with you and ask you about your work, because you're someone whose work has inspired mine, and I think we share we share friends and influences, and it would really be fun to put you in the spotlight at some point and let me grill you. So I'll put that bug in your ear.
Sure. I just took a
I would love to talk to you and Leela, actually. I think that would be really interesting.
We can get each other in the same house.
I don't know if you guys ever do that. I always want to, you know.
You can get us
no one ever asked to interview my, you know, I mean, we're such a team effort over here.
Yeah.
But I think that would be fun sometime. Sorry, everyone. I'm just
okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Okay. We'll do it. Let's do it.
Think about it.
I'll send you my music.
Put
first.
You in the hot seat. And send me your music. Yeah.
You don't want to hear. All right. Thanks so much. So inspiring. And again, I just want to thank you just for being out there and being the person that sort of we can look up to and know that at the very least, if maybe I haven't done my art every single day, but I know Austin is. I know Austin's keeping track of what our minds go through every day and like all the feels that we have, and like, you know, and trying to sort of report back on how to stay energized. And that's really.
But also there are days that Austin is reading a book by the pool and he is not beating himself up about.
No, right. Well, that's what I mean. It's all you're really just trying to keep, you know, not be too not to force anything, you know,
you could take the day off. You just have to come back tomorrow.
Right? Back to the routine, which I wrote down. All right. Yeah. This is official sign off. All right. Thank you so much. Sign, did we cover everything? I think we did, right? I think we're good. She says we're good. All right. Austin, thanks. We'll be in touch, and we'll send this YouTube link to your mom when you say.
Okay. Yeah. Send it to Sally. She'll love to see it.
All right. Bye, everybody. Oh, call to action. Sign up for one of our workshops and classes soon. So we're going to start doing more calls to action. So watch out.
Great.
Thanks, Austin.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.